Good day, my name is Gregory, and today we will be looking at unit number 7 in the New Headway Plus elementary book. The title of this unit is Then and Now. And not surprisingly, we will be looking at the past simple 1. We will look at regular verbs, irregular verbs, words that go together, and special occasions. And to start off with, speak to your partner and tell your partner, when were your grandparents and great-grandparents born? Where were they born? What were their jobs? If you know, tell your partner, and then let your partner tell you the same information. When I was young. Past simple, regular verbs. Listen and read Matty Smith's life now. Complete text A with the verbs that you hear. So we're going to listen to this paragraph, and I want you to complete the empty spaces with the verbs that you hear.
Unit 7. Tape script 7.1.
Matty Smith is 91 years old. She lives alone in Atlanta, Georgia. She starts her day at 7:30. First, she has a bath. Next, she cleans the house. And then she sits outside on her veranda and thinks about her past life. Then, she writes poems about it.
Did you get them? Let's listen again, this time with the script.
Unit 7. Tape script 7.1.
Matty Smith is 91 years old. She lives alone in Atlanta, Georgia. She starts her day at 7:30. First, she has a bath. Next, she cleans the house. And then she sits outside on her veranda and thinks about her past life. Then she writes poems about it.
Okay, check. There are all the missing words highlighted for you. Did you get it? If you did, well done. Now, paragraph B, which is this. Read and listen to text B about Matty's life a long time ago.
Tape script 7.2.
Matty was never at school. She lived with her mother and 4 sisters. She started work when she was 8. She worked in the cotton fields from 6 in the morning to 10 at night. She couldn't read or write, but she could think, and she created poems in her head.
Can you imagine working those hours from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night? That is a long, long working day, isn't it? Working in the cotton fields. Let's look at the grammar spots. Find examples of the past of is and can in text B. Past tense of is and can. Have a look. See if you can find that. Check. Matty was never at school. She started work when she was 8. She couldn't read or write, but she could think. You found those? If you did, well done. Now, complete the sentence with live in the correct form. Now she, blank alone, but when she was a child, she, blank with her mother and sisters. Let's check. Now, she lives alone. But when she was a child, she lived with her mother and sisters. Present simple, past simple. Do you get it? If you did, very well done. Find the past simple of start, work, and create in text B. And how do we form the past simple of regular verbs? So first, find the past simple of start, work, and create in this paragraph. You get it? Start, she started work, past tense of start. Work, she worked in the cotton fields, past tense of work. And the last one was creates. And she created poems in her head. You'll notice that each of those verbs, we added ed to make it past simple. So it was started, worked, and created. Now, let's look at the grammar reference on page 129, 7.1. Past simple, spelling of regular verbs. The normal rule is to add ed, worked, started. If the verb ends in e, add d. Lived, loved. If the verb has only one syllable and ends in one vowel and one consonant, double the consonant. So if it ends with a vowel, one vowel and one consonant, double the last consonant, as in stopped and planned. Verbs that end in a consonant plus y change to ied. So study becomes studied. Carry becomes carried. Got it? Good. Let's carry on. And we have some more listening. What is the past form of these verbs? Listen and practice saying them. So what is the past tense of these verbs? Listen.
Tape script 7.3.
Looked, worked, loved, learned, earned, married, died, hated, wanted.
Did you get those? Let's listen again, this time with the script.
Tape script 7.3.
Looked, worked, loved, learned, earned, married, died, hated, wanted.
And you'll notice, in this case, looked and worked. The ed is pronounced as t. Looked, worked. Here, the d at the end is pronounced d. So you have loved, learned, married, earned, died. And with this, it is pronounced id, hated, wanted. So the past tense with the d or the ed added to the word can have different pronunciations. Read and listen to Mattie talking about her past life. Complete the text using the past simple form of the verbs in exercise 3. So all of those gaps will be filled with the past tense of one of those verbs. Okay, so listen.
Tape script 7.4.
I worked from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. 16 hours in the cotton fields, and I only earned $2 a day. I sure hated that job, but I loved the poems in my head. I really wanted to learn to read and write. When I was 16, I married Hubert, and soon there were 6 children, 5 sons, then a daughter, Lily. Hubert died just before she was born. That was 65 years ago. So I looked after my family alone. There was no time for learning, but my children, they all learned to read and write. That was important to me. And when did I learn to read and write? I didn't learn until I was 86, and now I have 3 books of poems.
Wow. Imagine working for 16 hours a day for just $2 a day. It makes you wonder how you could stay alive on that. And she only learned to read and write when she was 86 years old. Can you imagine that? When she was 86, she only learned to read and write. And now she has already 3 books of poems that she has written. Isn't that amazing? Let's have a look at this grammar spot. Find a question and a negative in the last part of the text about Matty. Find a question and a negative. You see it? We were just talking about that. And when did I learn to read and write? I didn't learn until I was 86. Look at these questions. Where does she live now? Where did she live in 1950? Did is the past of do and does. We use did to form a question in the past simple. We use didn't, which is did not, to form the negative. She didn't learn to read until she was 86. Let's look at the grammar reference on page 129, 7.1. Past simple. 7.1. Past simple. Spelling of regular verbs. The normal rule is to add ed, as in worked, started. If the verb ends in e, add d, as in lived or loved. If the verb has only one syllable and ends in one vowel and one consonant, double the consonant. Stopped, planned. Remember that. If it has one syllable and ends in one vowel and one consonant, double the consonant. So stopped would be OP, vowel, consonant. Planned, AN, vowel, consonant. Verbs that end in a consonant plus Y change to IED, as in studied and carried. Now, complete the questions about Matty. They've done the first one for you. When did she start work? when she was 8 years old. Where blank she blank? The answer is in the cotton field. So where? Look at the answers and then you can figure out what the question is. Complete the questions, fill in the gaps. You get them? Let's listen.
Tape script 7.5. 1,
When did she start work?
When she was 8 years old.
2,
Where did she work?
In the cotton fields.
3,
Who did she live with?
Her mother and sisters.
4,
How many hours did she work?
16 hours a day.
5,
How much did she earn?
$2 a day.
6,
Who did she marry?
Hubert.
7,
When did Hubert die?
65 years ago.
8,
When did she learn to read?
She didn't learn until she was 86.
How did you do? Let's listen again, this time with the script.
tape script 7.5. 1,
When did she start work?
When she was 8 years old.
2,
Where did she work?
In the cotton fields.
3,
Who did she live with?
Her mother and sisters.
4,
How many hours did she work?
16 hours a day.
5,
How much did she earn?
$2 a day.
6,
Who did she marry?
Hubert.
7,
When did Hubert die?
65 years ago.
8,
When did she learn to read?
She didn't learn until she was 86.
Okay. And there are all the answers for you. Check your work and check your spelling. And if you got them all correct, very well done. Now, talking about you. Complete the sentences with did, was, or were. So, number 1, where blank you born? Where blank your father born? Did, was, or were. Go through all 7 of these statements and complete the blanks. Fill in the blanks. All done? Good. Let's check your answers. Where were you born? Where was your father born? When did you start school? When did you learn to read and write? Who was your first teacher? What was your favorite subject? Where did you live when you were a child? And number 7, did you live in a house or a flat? And I would say, speak to your partner and ask him the questions from exercise 1. And then let him ask you the questions. And when you give your answers, answer in complete sentences, please, not just one-word answers. Pronunciation. The ed ending of regular verbs has 3 different pronunciations. Listen to the examples. Then put the verbs you hear in the correct column. Listen.
Tape script 7.6.
Worked, lived, started, married, loved, hated, finished, looked, died, visited, cleaned, liked.
Let's listen again, this time with the scripts, and you can see the words.
Tape script 7.6.
Worked, lived, started, married, loved, hated, finished, looked, died, visited, cleaned, liked.
Were you able to hear and decide which column to go put the words into with a t, da, or id sound? Let's check your answers. Worked, finished, looked, liked, lived, married, loved, died, cleaned, started, hated, visited. And these can be very difficult for people who are learning English to decide how to pronounce the ed at the end of the past tense. We will learn more about that as we go along. The year I was born. Irregular verbs. Look at the list of irregular verbs on page 142. Write the past simple form of the verbs in the box. Which one isn't irregular? So, have a look at page 142. And then write the past simple form of the verbs in the box. What do you think? Be, give, die, buy, begin, go, become, sell, come, leave, win, get, have, make. Fill in the gaps of the past simple. And if you are done, let's check. Be, was or were. Begin, began. Come, came. Get, got. Give, gave. Go, went. Leave, left. Have, had. Die, died. And that is the one regular verb out of the whole lot. Die and died. Become, became. Win, won. Make, made. Buy, bought. And sell, sold. How did you do with that exercise? Not always too simple, is it? Now listen and repeat the past simple forms. Listen and repeat.
Tape script 7.7.
Was, began, came, got, gave, went, left, had, died, became, won, made, bought, sold.
Okay, all those irregular verbs apart from die. When were you born? What was in the news that year? Can you remember? the year that you were born in, what was the big news item in that year? Now, listen to the conversation between James and his father. Complete the sentences with the verbs in exercise 1. So, you'll use these verbs to fill in these gaps. Listen to James and his father.
Tape script 7.8.
Dad, we've got a project at school on the year I was born, so tell me about 1996. That's when you left Qatar, wasn't it?
Yes, you were born in January, and we left later that year and came to Saudi Arabia. I got a job in Riyadh, my first as an internet consultant.
So, what was in the news that year?
Well, there was an election in America that year. Bill Clinton won and got 4 more years in the White House, and I always remember the news of the Saudi Airlines crash in November.
What was that?
It was a mid-air collision between a Saudi Airlines 747, a jumbo, and a Kazakhstan cargo plane over India. All 349 people on board both planes died.
No, that's terrible.
Yes, it was. It was the worst mid-air collision in history. Still is. And all because the Kazakhstan pilot couldn't understand the English instructions from the air traffic controller.
No way.
And that was one of the first big news stories on the new news channel, Al Jazeera. They made their first broadcast in November 1996.
And it was an Olympic year, wasn't it?
That's right. Michael Johnson was the star. He won the 400 metres, and then he came first in the 200 metres too. It was a fantastic run. A world record for a long time, until Usain Bolt came along.
Yes, I remember Johnson was there when Usain Bolt got the new record.
And it was a great year for Saudi football. Saudi Arabia became champions of Asia again. They won the Asian Cup in the UAE. The final was between Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
Yes, people still talk about that. And you became an internet consultant. How big was the internet in 1996?
It had about 100,000 websites at the beginning of the year, and more than 500,000 by the end of it.
Were there any search engines like Google then?
There were search engines, but they weren't very good. That was the year they began work on Google, but it was called Backrub at first. They gave it the name Google later.
Computers were really big then, weren't they?
No, not really big. And that was the year Palm sold their first handheld computers with internet connection, the Palm Pilot. I bought one, of course. It was very cool for those days.
So, were you able to complete the gaps with the verbs from exercise 1? Let's have a look. James. His parents left Qatar. His father got a job in Riyadh, went to live in Saudi Arabia, and his father got a job in Riyadh. World events. The missing words are 1, made, died, was. Bill Clinton won. Al Jazeera made. 349 people died. It was the worst mid-air collision. Sports and games became and came. Saudi Arabia became champions. Michael Johnson came first. And in technology, had, sold, bought, began, gave. The internet had 100,000 websites. Palm Computing sold the Palm Pilot. 500,000 people bought. 2 PhD students began, which the search engine that became Google. They later gave it a new name, Google. How did you do with that? Did you get the missing words? If you did, very well done. Practice. When did it happen? What important dates can you remember? What happened in the world? What happened in your country? Make a list of events, then make questions and ask the other groups. What important dates can you remember? When did the First World War begin and end, for instance? When did the first person walk on the moon, for instance? See what important events you can remember the dates for. Look at these phrases. Last night, last Monday, last week, last month, last year. Yesterday morning, yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening. We do not say last evening or last afternoon. It is yesterday afternoon. But we do say last week, last month, last year, last Monday, and last night. So work with your partner and ask and answer questions with, when did you last? Ask another question for more information. So for instance, when did you last have a holiday? Last August. Where did you go? To Spain. So ask and answer questions with your partner. When did you last something? Go on vacation, write a book, read a book, go on the internet, check your email, and so on. And here are some examples for you. When did you last have a holiday, cook a meal, go shopping, read a book, take a photograph, go on a picnic, lose something, write a letter, get a present, have dinner in a restaurant? Now, read these sentences and put a tick in the box next to the correct sentence. For instance, he bought some new shoes. He buyed some new shoes. Which one of those two is correct? Read through all the sentences from 1 to 8 and put a tick next to the one that you believe is correct. And if you have finished that, then let's look at the answers. He bought some new shoes. Where did you go yesterday? Did you see Jane last week? Did she get the job? I went out yesterday evening. He studied French at university. What did you have for breakfast? And number 8, I was in Riyadh last week. Did you get them? If you got all of them, well done. If you didn't, make the correction so that when you study your work in the future, you will have the correct answers on hand to look at. Reading and speaking. 60 words of flights. Look at the pictures. Who are the men? What did they do? When did they do it? So who is that? Well, his name is Louis Blériot. What did he do and when did he do it? And who are these men? What did they do and when did they do it? Louis Blériot made the first air journey in 1909. And Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon in 1969. So between the first flight and the first man on the moon, only 60 years passed. It was only 60 years. Read the titles. What was phenomenal? Let's check. The progress in aviation in the 20th century was phenomenal. The meaning of phenomenal means really amazing, outstanding, remarkable. I told you here. There are just 60 years between the first flight and the first man on the moon. In the 20th century, progress in aviation was phenomenal. So let's read about the first air journey and then read about the first man on the moon and answer the questions: when and where did the journey begin? On July the 25th, 1909, a Frenchman, Louis Blériot, became the first man to complete an air journey when he flew from Calais in the north of France to Dover in the south of England. Blériot's flight amazed the whole of Europe. People thought that such a journey was impossible. The flight. The flight wasn't easy. Mr. Blériot, a 37-year-old engineer, couldn't swim, so he didn't want to come down in the channel. He couldn't walk very well either because of a leg injury, and he didn't have a compass. On the morning of the 25th, he took off at 4:30 from a field at the edge of a cliff. It took 37 minutes to complete the 22-mile journey. The plane flew at 40 miles per hour at an altitude of 250 feet. Everything went well until he flew into fog. I continued flying for 10 minutes, but I couldn't see the land, only the sky and the sea. It was the most dangerous part of the flight. I wasn't worried about the machine. It flew beautifully. Finally, I saw the land, he told reporters. When he got to Dover, he saw a French newspaper journalist waving a flag. He cut the engine at 60 feet and crashed into the field. The news quickly went around the world, and Mr. Blériot's flight was celebrated in London and Paris. He won a prize of £1,000. The crossing was the start of modern aviation, said Louis Blériot, the grandson of the pioneer. And look at that aircraft. It doesn't look terribly sturdy or safe, does it? And then, 60 years later, on the 16th of July 1969, at 9:30 in the morning, Apollo 11 lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. There were 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. The enormous rocket took 3 days to complete the 250,000 miles to the moon, traveling at 6 miles per second, 21,600 miles per hour. And it circled the moon 30 times, giving time to prepare for the landing. The lunar module landed on a part of the moon called the Sea of Tranquility at 8:17 in the evening on 20th of July. It was time for the astronauts to rest, but they were too excited to sleep. At 3 o'clock in the morning on July 21st, Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon. 600 million people all over the world watched the moonwalk on TV. As Armstrong took his first steps, he said the famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Walking on the moon. Armstrong and Aldrin spent 2.5 hours walking on the moon. They collected samples and set up scientific equipment. Finally, they put up a US flag. After 22 hours on the moon, the lunar module lifted off and flew up to join the rocket that took them back to Earth. They left an inscription. Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind. This flight was the beginning of man's exploration of space. So now work together, work with your partner, and answer the questions on either the first journey or the first man on the moon. When and where did the journey begin? How long did it take? How far was the journey there? How fast did he or they go? Where did the journey end? And in what way was this flight a beginning? And when you've got your answers and when you finish that exercise, let's check. The first air journey. The journey began in Calais on the north of France on June the 25th, 1909. It took 37 minutes. It was 22 miles. He flew at 40 miles per hour. The journey ended in Dover in the south of England, and it was the start of modern aviation. And the first man on the moon. The journey began at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on the 16th of July 1969 at 9:30 in the morning. It took 3 days. It was 250,000 miles. They flew at 21,600 miles per hour. The journey ended on a part of the moon called the Sea of Tranquility, and it was the beginning of man's exploration of space. And again, working with your partner, look again at the texts and answer these questions. Why was Blériot's flight difficult? Was the weather good? How did he know where to land? What did he win? Why couldn't the astronaut sleep? What did Armstrong say as he stepped onto the moon? How long did they spend walking on the moon's surface? What did they leave on the moon? Work with your partner, and when you've got the answers, and all the answers are in the texts that we have read, check. It was difficult for Blériot because he couldn't swim, he couldn't walk very well because of a leg injury, and he didn't have a compass. Was the weather good? No, it was foggy. There was fog. How did he know where to land? He saw a French newspaper journalist waving a flag. And what did he win? He won £1,000. Why couldn't the astronauts sleep? They were too excited. What did Armstrong say as he stepped onto the moon? That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. How long did they spend walking on the moon? They spent 2.5 hours walking on the moon. And what did they leave on the moon? They left a US flag on the moon. Did you get the answers? If you did, well done. And find these numbers in the texts. What do they refer to? In 1909, we have the numbers 37, 430, 40, 250, 1,000. And in 1969, we have the numbers 3, 30, 8.17, 600 million, 1, and 22. What do those numbers refer to? When you've found them and you've answered the questions, check your answers. And there they are. Blériot was just 37 years old, and it took him 37 minutes. He took off from France at 4:30 in the morning. He flew his plane at 40 miles per hour. He flew at 250 feet above the sea, and he won a prize of £1,000. The 3 astronauts flew in Apollo 11. The rocket took 3 days to get to the moon. It circled the moon 30 times. It landed at 8:17 on the 20th of July, 1969. 600 million people watched on TV. Neil Armstrong said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." And the astronauts spent 22 hours on the moon. Did you find all of those numbers and the answers? If you did, very well done. And this is where we end today's lesson. I hope you found it useful and beneficial. I hope you found it interesting. As always, I urge you to practice what you have learned. Read English books, read English articles, practice speaking English. Keep it fresh in your mind, and it'll become easier and you'll gain in confidence as you go along. Until next time, I'll say goodbye and thank you.